builds bridges between institutions and communities. In this regard, SEK Mqhayi Day is more than a commemoration. It is a call to action. It challenges us to ensure that isiXhosa and all African languages find space not at the margins, but at the very heart of our academic, our cultural, and our governance landscapes. By doing so, we do not only preserve our heritage, we empower communities, we affirm identities, and we enrich the intellectual and moral fabric of our nation. Since its humble beginnings in 2014, this event has now grown into an institutional milestone that is officially inscribed in our university calendar. Its growth is in itself testimony to the enduring power of language and the determination of scholars, students, and communities to carry forward Mqhayi's vision. As we celebrate him today, let us remember that his words not only live in memory, they live among us, offering insight, warning, encouragement, and direction. As we link his legacy with Heritage Month, let us be reminded that our languages are our heritage, our culture, and our tools of empowerment. They are the key to transforming institutions and to building communities that are just, that are inclusive, and that are resilient. On behalf of Rhodes University, I warmly welcome you to this celebration of language, culture, and legacy. May today inspire us not only to reflect, but to act, ensuring that the vision of SEK Mqhayi continues to guide us in shaping the present and building the future. Ndiyabulela kakhulu, enkosi, and thank you.
Masibulele kakhulu kumama wethu ngokuthi asamkele. Just to speak briefly to the purpose of the day, it's actually Mqhayi Week that we are celebrating as part of the Heritage Month. We started this morning in one of the lectures in the course of journalism, where Mr. Xolani Kondile presented a lecture on social media, African languages, and technology. And later on today, we also had another lecture by Mr. Mpupa, who was presenting on African languages, traditional dancing, and umxhenso wesintu, and all those things. And now we are here for the Deputy Minister, who's going to be presenting on the topic that the DVC has spoken to. Tomorrow, on Tuesday, we've got a drama play by students where they will be playing Ityala Lamawele, elibhalwe ngumqhayi. Then the big event is on Thursday, the 25th, from 12 o'clock until 4 p.m., where we'll have Dr. Xolisa Chongol, who's going to be our guest speaker. Then this is the Mqhayi Week that we're celebrating as part of the Heritage Month. Okay, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going straight to the introduction of the guest speaker. Ngizacela uProfessor Nkomo asifundele i-biography ka-Deputy Minister. Then immediately after that, we go straight to the DM to speak.
Molweni, good evening. It's such a singular honor to read the biography of our honorable speaker tonight. In fact, I think Mr. Sam has put it well, because I thought I would just introduce her, but then now I realize that I actually do not know her. I have to read her biography. Honorable Deputy Minister Nongceba Mhlauli is the Deputy Minister in the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa. In this role, she is responsible for overseeing key national programs, including Statistics South Africa, the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative, and Operation Vulindlela, which is government structural reform program to accelerate economic growth and recovery. A seasoned communication strategist and public servant, Mhlauli has more than a decade of experience in governance, policy development, and strategic communication. She previously served as a spokesperson for the ministry in the presidency, where she managed high-level media relations, speech writing, and public messaging. She was also the head of communications and spokesperson for the ANC Parliamentary Caucus, and earlier a communications specialist in the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. Passionate about youth development, equity, and institutional transformation, Mhlauli also serves on the ANC Executive Committee and National Working Committee, inspiring a new generation of young leaders. Now I get to the most exciting part for me, where it all started, how we got to where she is. Honorable Mhlauli joined Rhodes University in 2008. She completed a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and Political Studies and went on to do a Bachelor of Arts Honors in African Language Studies and Political Studies before completing a Master of Arts in African Language Studies and Social Policy with distinction. She has done so many good things that this short program unfortunately doesn't allow us to know her so well, but I think to the student, she was or she is a student leader. So you have your leader in the house. Maybe at the end, you can ask her a few questions about other things. Colleagues, I'm not going to take more further time, only to say, no, Mhlauli supervisors are all here except one. She knows them. Over to you, Honorable Deputy President. Minister.
The only thing that the Prof didn't say in the introduction is that he was actually one of my supervisors. He and Prof Nikerk, who's also here, are actually the reason behind that distinction. So thank you very much. The Honorable Vice Chancellor in absentia, Professor Mabizela, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mzilikazi, the Dean of Humanities, Prof. Msindo in absentia, our Head of School of Languages and Literatures, Prof. Mukenge, the Head of the African Language Studies Section, Prof. Kwacha, and all the academic professionals that are here today, the various lecturers. In particular, I must also recognize Mamuno Silela. Sasimbiza Mamuno Silela in our days. I hear they're now calling her Dr. Masilela, but she used to be Mamuno Silela to us. Still is. I'm glad that hasn't changed. And all the other lecturers present today, our esteemed guests, members of the media, the student body, and the Makanda community, Molweni, Sanbonani, Dumelang, Goeienaand, and good evening. I was actually thinking right now that this feels like an exam. It feels like an exam because all of the people who used to teach me are busy sitting here taking notes. Lando sasimfundiso yona actually did it stick 10 years later. So it does feel like an exam. It is a profound honor to return home, and it is home for me because, in fact, all the degrees that I have, I did at Rhodes University, except the one that I'm currently busy with at the University of South Africa. So it's a profound honor to return home as a Rhodes University alumni of the African Language Studies and Journalism, to join you during Heritage Month for the Mhlauli Week. And Mr. Sam, I realized that you decided to invite me today, not on Thursday, which you've just said is the big day. So I don't know why I'm not invited on Thursday, which is the big day, but anyway. We gather to celebrate a giant of our letters, Imbongi Esizwe Jikelele, whose work helped standardize isiXhosa, preserved its beauty, and expanded its possibilities during the 20th century. When we were arriving, I was actually reminding Umamno Silela that we were actually the first group of students that did isiXhosa for mother tongue when it was introduced at Rhodes University in 2008. And she was reminding me, in Dobana, my Xhosa back then was terrible. But a lot of the work that we actually did was really as part of the legacy of this great person that we are celebrating this week, which is the standardization of the language, preserving its beauty, and ensuring that we do expand it into the various possibilities that it presents. Tonight, we all celebrate the institutional journey that brings African languages from the margins of our past of discrimination and devaluation to the very center of knowledge, identity, and nation building. This commemoration affirms that our heritage is not only something we remember during September, but a living legacy we are called to carry forward through the systems and institutions that shape our daily life. This commemoration at this particular institution also affirms that like S.A. Mkai, our country belongs to all who live in it, black and white. It also speaks to Mkai's deep legacy as a national treasure, not a sectarian but inclusive and exclusive, not a sectarian exclusive phenomenon. It epitomizes the poet's traditional role, which was not just to praise leaders, but also to criticize them on their waywardness. Upon the occasion of the visit of the Prince of Wales in 1925, Mkai composed the poem I'm failing the test. Zweli Azuza ichawe lamabhalitane, wherein Mkai exposed the paradoxes and contradictions of Western civilization. He puts into question the intentions of the British colonizers who bring a preacher as a paragon of peace, accompanied by a soldier who symbolizes war. He did the same with his criticism of monarchs like Nceka, whose dog, Mbumba Sheikh, became so big that it started undermining people, his courtiers, and ultimately himself as the master. As we commemorate his work 80 years later, since his passing in 1945, we celebrate a towering historian, biographer, novelist, and dramatist, and poet. This year marks what would have been Mkai's 150th birthday. This occasion is testament to the enduring legacy, as his work will remain an integral part of our heritage for another 150 years and beyond. Apart from his literary works, the constant reminder of Mkai's legacy, even though many of us may not be aware of this, is actually the national anthem that we sang at the beginning of this lecture. Mkai wrote some of the stanzas to Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, which today forms part of the national anthem of the Republic of South Africa. Compatriots, it is also fitting that this occasion is held during Heritage Month, because Mkai is an integral part of our literary heritage. Heritage Month is not simply about nostalgia or cultural rituals. It is about understanding that heritage as a living covenant between generations. It is a promise to carry forward languages, memory, and meaning into the future. The songs we sing, the proverbs we inherit, and the languages we dream in are not only cultural expressions, they are tools of human capability. They shape how we learn, how we govern, how we innovate, and how we imagine a shared future. When a community's language is affirmed, those people are seen. When people are seen, people participate. When they participate, democracy deepens and development accelerates. These are the ideals which Mhlauli lived and devoted his entire life. This is why governance must treat indigenous languages not as an afterthought, but as an essential infrastructure of citizenship and community empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, governance is often described in technical terms such as frameworks, regulations, and performance indicators. But at its heart, governance is about answering a simple question. Can all South Africans access opportunities in their language of preference and dignity? As government, our responsibility is to enable that access. We must implement policies that recognize indigenous languages in official communication, service delivery, and public engagement. A policy is an intention. Implementation is integrity. We must resource implementation by ensuring that budgets are available. If access to state information is crucial for participatory democracy and governance, language access is a priority. It must be visible in the budgetary line items, whether for translation or interpreting services, language units, terminology development, or accessible public information across multiple platforms. Colleagues, His Excellency President Ramaphosa has strengthened our capability by recently proclaiming the South African Language Practitioners Act for implementation, and I actually think that proclamation happened last month, during the month of August. This law will build professional pathways for professional recognition of linguists, translators, interpreters, terminologists, corpus developers, language technologists, and language teachers. As language scholars, we will depend on yourselves to track the implementation of this particular piece of legislation and conduct further research which will positively contribute to the advancement of this crucial area of work. As members of the public and students alike, we must measure what matters by reporting on language access with the same seriousness as we report on financial performance, tracking reach, quality, turnaround times, and most importantly, public satisfaction. Equally, we must partner for scale, because as government, we can't do this alone. We must work with universities, civil society organizations, traditional leadership, creative industries, and the private sector to unlock innovation and reach communities where they are through their languages and cultures and end poverty and destitution. Institutional transformation is not only about who sits at the table, but also about the language in which that conversation is being held at the table. When language of learning, teaching, and assessment, research, administration, and community engagement is widened, inclusion deepens and excellence grows. In research, African languages are not only objects of study, but they're also instruments of original scholarship. From law and ethics to public health, climate and climate adaptation, indigenous languages carry concepts that can sharpen analysis and ground solutions in lived experiences. In government administration, a transformed institution answers the phone in multiple languages, sends notices in languages of the people understand, and create feedback channels in community languages. The values of Batupili, people first, include the value of communication. And communication includes the element of engagement between government and citizens, not only for transactional purposes, but with the understanding that the underlying services are relevant to the cultural context from which language operates. That is not a nice to have, it is a service quality imperative. Now, I'm also mindful of the fact that I am preaching to the converted and that I'm speaking to a room of experts who do not need to be convinced on the need of language access. The legislative and policy frameworks are already in place. What we lack is not policy, but pace. We need execution, coordination, and most importantly, measurable impact. That is why tonight we also want to focus on how we can accelerate what is already government policy to achieve systematic transformation. Allow me therefore to outline 5 strategic actions that can help us move forward beyond compliance and drive institutional change in the implementation of our indigenous African language agenda. Firstly, we must move from symbolic compliance to measurable performance in language access. South Africa already has a strong legislative base in the Pan-South African Language Board Act, the Use of Official Languages Act, and the National Language Policy Framework of 2003. However, implementation remains inconsistent and often superficial. The presidency has the opportunity to champion a National Language Access Performance Index to audit departments annually, publish public scorecards, and link budget allocations to performance. Indicators should include turnaround times for translations, user satisfaction, and a minimum threshold for public communication issued in at least 3 official languages per province, as is the current government policy. Secondly, we must reposition community language hubs as economic and innovative nodes. While language units and resource centers are envisaged in the National Language Policy Framework, many are under-resourced and underutilized. These must be transformed into community language and innovation hubs housed at our institutions of higher learning, libraries, or schools, and embedded within the local economic development strategies. These hubs should receive sustainable funding to incubate language tech startups, small businesses with paid technology and translation services, and provide accredited work integrated learning opportunities for our students. This would reposition language work as an engine of local economic development rather than a compliance burden, which we often see. Thirdly, we must accelerate terminology and corpus development through open innovation. The National Language Services and the South African Center for Digital Language Resources made commendable progress in terminology and corpus building, but the outputs are fragmented and often inaccessible. We need a national open source terminology platform where government, our institutions of higher learning, and industry collaborate to co-create domain-specific terms in justice, health, climate, and digital technologies. Contributions should be accredited, like research outputs, to innovate, to incentivize academic participation, and content be integrated into curricula, public sector systems, and emerging AI models so that African languages are part of the technologies that are shaping our futures. Fourth, we must professionalize and incentivize indigenous language capability within the public service. The Use of Official Language Act already requires government departments to establish language units, yet there are very few in existence. Indigenous language competence must be recognized as a scarce and incentivized skill, supported by bursaries, salary notches, and promotion pathways. Departments should be required to maintain in-house language units, staffed by certified practitioners. For all community-faced posts, conversational proficiency in a dominant local language must become a minimum standard for appointment. And for community-facing contracts, language capability should be considered even in tender evaluations. This will embed language capability as a value-creating asset within the state. Fifth, we must embed African languages directly into the digital systems government uses and builds. The Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, as well as the State Information Technology Agency, which is called SITA, are leading the state's digital transformation, yet most tools are still largely only in English. Indigenous language readiness must become a mandatory scorecard criterion in government ICT procurement. Every government-funded program, chatbot, e-learning system, or AI solution should launch with multilingual interfaces, not as add-ons later on, as we see often happening. Therefore, the DCDT can drive this by funding open datasets, speech corpus, as well as language models that enable African languages to function naturally in digital ecosystems. This will ensure that voice notes, chat boxes, and public portals speak African languages naturally. Ladies and gentlemen, Rhodes University has already signaled leadership by celebrating SE Mkai Week as part of its official calendar, convening scholarship, performance, and public dialogue. Therefore, this is not symbolic. It speaks to structural transformation. By placing African languages at the heart of academic life, you are nurturing the next generation of language professionals, knowledge producers, and civic leaders who will carry the work into the state, the market, as well as the community. This is what Mkai strived for more than a century ago. In 1911, he resigned from Lovedale College because he refused to teach isiXhosa in English, because he believed that the language had the capacity to stand on its own. In an article he published in Umthetheleli Wabantu on 27 August 1927, Mkai indicates that he also refuted the version of history that was being taught because it represented the interest of Europeans. He felt that it portrayed black people as heathens, cowards, and thieves, whereas Europeans were depicted as heroic conquerors. As the old adage says, until the lion have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. As an alumnus, I am proud that the School of Languages and Literatures and the African Language Studies Department are animating this legacy with research, teaching, and most importantly, public engagement, such as the platform that we have today. Your work under the National Research Foundation Saatchi Chair in Intellectualization is building a scaffolding of our country, the scaffolding our country needs for a truly multilingual knowledge system. DVC and head of the department, I must also state that I was a bit disappointed to hear that a student had to struggle to have their research proposal written in isiXhosa considered. We view this as a regrettable step, particularly from a university that published the first PhD written in isiXhosa. It took more than a century for Rhodes University to produce the first doctoral thesis written entirely in isiXhosa. And just to brag, I must also just brag that the student who wrote that was my former classmate, and I tell everyone who's willing to listen that I know him. And that we did isiXhosa for mother tongue together when we were in first year. Now that joke made me lose my track. Mkai taught us that language is not merely a tool, but it is a home. The late Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who passed away earlier on this year, put it eloquently when he said, language carries culture, and culture carries, particularly through orator and literature, the entire body of values by which we come to perceive ourselves, as well as our place in the world, close quote. It is therefore encouraging to see young people continue with the legacy of Mhlauli through both oral and written poetry. I'm delighted to learn that a gentleman by the name of Akona Mafana, a young poet, will be bringing together a collective of poets under the banner of Ukweleli Kyala on the 27th. Is that correct? Yes. On the 27th as part of the Heritage Month celebrations. As we continue to honor Mhlauli's legacy, we must ensure that every child can learn, every patient can understand, every voter can decide, every entrepreneur can grow, and every artist can create in the language that gives them power. Let this Heritage Month be a turning point where we elevate language from a policy text to public practice. Let us unite in our diversity. Let us set targets, allocate budgets, build capacity, and most importantly, measure outcomes. Let us fuse scholarship and governance so that research becomes regulation and regulation becomes real change in the lives of our people. Ladies and gentlemen, as government, we will leverage the government communication and information system, which is also called the GCIS, and relevant departments to strengthen multilingual public information for priority programs, including youth employment services, health prevention messages, and disaster risk communication. And we will engage industry partners in the creative and technology sectors to co-develop open tools and data sets for African language speech and text solutions. So therefore, in closing, to the university, I say keep opening doors of African languages across curricula, research, administration, and technology. To the academics and students, publish, code, translate, and create because your work moves the dial. To communities and cultural workers, keep telling our stories in our languages because you are the nation builders that we so need. And to our government partners, as well as those in government, let us deliver together, not in slogans, but in systems that speak to people where they are. Heritage Month asks us one question: what will we bequeath? If we bequeath languages that are alive in the classrooms, hospitals, courts, startups, studios, and councils, then we will bequeath dignity, and with it, the development that our country so badly needs. Allow me to close with the timeless words of S.M. Mhlauli, who reminded us, "Isizwe asiphili ngaphandle kwenkcubeko yaso." Translated, a nation cannot live without its culture. May the spirit of Mhlauli guide our courage, and may our governance honor and sustain the languages of our nation and help us in our respective shared tongues to heal the divisions of our past. Diabulela, I thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much to the Deputy Minister, Siyabulela kakhulu sisi wami. Now I understand why I'm this nervous. My supervisor is here as well. Now this feels like a thesis, a PhD thesis. I'm even shaking. Professor Lorenzo Dalvilt is here. That's my supervisor. Good to see you. And once again, the second supervisor is watching online. Can you imagine? The challenge. Okay, thank you so much, DM, for that presentation. Hopefully that the students have heard you. They are going to engage you. Just be ready for that. Wonderful. Be ready for that. Just to remind you, apologies to other media houses that are here. Just to mention that Grokot's Mail is celebrating 155 years this week. This could be aligned with the fact that S.K. Mhlauli was born 150 years ago. Let's clap for that as well. We are now heading straight to the Q&A session, question and answer session. We'll allow you guys to ask questions in Xhosa, English or Afrikaans. By the way, the DM speaks all three of them fluently. You can ask in Afrikaans, she's going to understand. Okay? We'll take questions from the students mainly, or the colleagues as well. They can ask questions. Okay, great. What is going to happen? I'll take, should I take 5 at once, DM, or should I take 3? Okay, let me be in control, that's fine. Great, let me have 3 to 5 questions. By the show of hands, are there any questions in the house from this powerful presentation by the DM? Students, buza ngesiXhosa okanye uprate. When I was doing Afrikaans, what I knew is that Pratsetal. There was a book, Pratsetal. That's the only thing I know in Afrikaans, Pratsetal. That's the only thing. Let us go. Okay. Anyone can ask a question, guys, from the presentation. Let me see the hands. Sanukoyika, man. Sanukoyika. It's gonna, okay. That's the first one. Noted. Okay. Second one by the supervisor. Second question by the supervisor. The third one, is there any third question for the first round? Any third question that we can get? Okay, for now they're still thinking. I know them. Sorry, Prof? Yes, I can, yes. There's the third one by Prof Mukenge. Thank you so much. Let's go to the first question. Will you need a mic? You should be fine. Wonderful.
In the realm of understanding the integrative parts of how language and our native languages will be integrated in our lives, not only just at a university level, but like on a foundation phase level. Because I have younger brothers and sisters in school who are still being taught the same curriculum in the same way, and the understanding of English is more it's the idea is more prevalent that if you understand English, then you will succeed. So this idea is still being perpetuated. I wanted to understand how will this be integrated on that level.
Okay, thank you so much. Prof. Ngomo?
Do I introduce myself again? I'm the supervisor. But now, I was like a student, so mine are just comments, not questions. I think the Deputy Minister raised some very important points that applies even to our institution. Hello, yes. Firstly, I liked it so much when you said policy is about intention, and I'm sure it rang loud in Dr. Noslela's ears, because that's the point that we're making today at one of the faculty board meetings, where we're saying our revised language policy cannot be rejected on the basis of where do you think we'll get the money to implement it. So we're saying we need to demonstrate the right intentions, and then the integrity of implementation will follow afterwards. So that for me was an important takeaway. And then the other was when you made a call for the nation to move beyond mere compliance and superficial implementation. And I think even us as universities are actually at risk of that. We can promote African languages for mere visibility without integrating them fully into our academic project and our institutional transformation agenda. So I hope all those with ears heard you well. Ghost.
Thank you so much, Prof.
session. I learned a lot, but I have a few questions. Can I go with you? Yeah. The first one, I want to know the life of a kind. How this life can stay forever as a lampion, as a light for even the generation to come. We don't want to start something and in the course of the process it stops. And the second one is, do you think we can learn only through the poems he wrote, or there is maybe, according to his own identity, can we learn something from his own identity for the generation to come? If we learn from the identity or only the poems or the writings? Thank you, man.
Oscar Kurumov, GM, will you answer from there or here?
Thank you very much. I think I'll start with the student, Luluto, because I feel that it's unfair that the professor is also asking questions. But that's a joke. So firstly, you know, what you raise is so fundamental. And that's actually why you would have seen, I think it was last year, earlier on this year, when President Ramaphosa signed the Bela Act. And one of the important elements of that piece of legislation is actually around the issue of language. Because what it actually does, the Bela Act, one of the intentions of that piece of legislation is actually to ensure that learners from your early childhood development phase, which is your early, schooling phases, are able to have access have the ability to access education in the languages of their choice. And you would have seen how some sectors of society were actually protesting against that. And those protests were not by accident, because remember some schools, even though, and this is why we're saying when we were speaking, that we don't have a problem of policy, right? Because if you look at the legislation that is there in terms of basic education and language, schools actually should be providing the option of mother tongue education. But then certain schools are governed by certain what do they call them? SGPs are called, what's the SGPs? School governing bodies, yes. So there will be a piece of legislation that says that as Unomela, I can take my child to a school in Pretoria East and go there and send it for class, right? Then the school governing body can decide, but actually, we're not going to have this class because we've decided that the student governing, the school governing body, right? And then that child is denied the ability to get education in their mother tongue because a body that is not even in the constitution has decided that. So it's one of the things that, and it's still a big, if you follow Parliament, and obviously now we have the GNU, so we have different, views around some of the pieces of legislation, which is also just a function of where we are in terms of the outcomes of the elections last year that I don't want to dwell into. But the point that I want to make is that that piece of legislation is such an important step in ensuring that we implement access to language from primary school and that we enforce it as well. And one of the things that we are doing right now is that the minister, who's also, by the way, a Rhodes alumni, we were actually in the same journalism and politics class, has just issued regulations around the implementation of that. And I think the most important thing for ourselves as student population and academia and also just members of the public, what's most important for us is to actually track the implementation of it. So beyond the regulations like the signed and the piece of legislation that was signed. We also have the responsibility to make sure that in our schools, where our children are, where we participate, we make sure that it is in line. And I can tell you from my own experience and I'm saying a supposed person in the context that my name is Mhlauli, so everyone's going to assume that I grew up speaking Xhosa, but actually I grew up speaking Afrikaans, and I went to an Afrikaans school. And I actually only later on in my life, when I got to university, interfaced with Xhosa as a mother tongue language. So you can imagine learning a new language at 18, when actually your entire life you grew up speaking Afrikaans because the school you went to was Afrikaans first language. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I think for me what's most important is to ensure that we track the implementation of these policies that do exist, because we got us on, and we must make sure that we also hold the implementers of those policies, which is ourselves as government, accountable to make sure that they actually do see the light of day. Prof Ngoma, I couldn't agree with you, and it's just of course a comment that you made, to say how do we, it's often interesting because we went to, I was actually thinking about this as I was coming here. 2 weeks ago, we went to, so what we're trying to do as government in the JCPS cluster, JCPS stands for Justice, Crime Prevention, and something else, that's something good. But the point is that it's basically the cluster that deals with your police, your justice department, and all justice prevention departments. So we went to, and I'm part of that because from the presidency obviously, so we went as the JCPS cluster on an outreach program in Bulubedu, in Limpopo. So we were visiting the courts, we were visiting the police stations, the Tutuzela centers, and basically all centers of government where our citizens interact with arms of the state in the crime prevention cluster. And this is like in the heart of rural Limpopo. And we were given pamphlets, and they were all in English. And I remember there was a decision, why are you giving people in Balobedu English pamphlets? It's Mabatini, like there's no way that we can come there with English pamphlets as government. And the answer that we got is that they don't have money to translate, that there was no money to translate, and it was easier to then print in English, you know. And we actually went back and said, we can't do that. We can't, the answer we can't deny access, because that's denying access. When I give you a pamphlet in a language you don't understand, I'm denying you access to that information. And by denying you access to that information, I'm denying you access to that particular state institution. That's basically what we're doing. And we actually went back with the chair of the cluster, Minister Mhlauli, and in our next round, which is last week, Mrs. Sentata, we actually made sure that as part of the budgeting, so as long as all the departments came together and said, we didn't budget for this initially when we did the work because it didn't come to our mind, to our heads, that this is an important aspect of the work that we are doing. And it was only when we arrived, we actually planned it here. And in the next round, when we actually went back, all of the departments, as part of their outreach budgets, we actually said, if we go into a place, the information that we're coming with must be in the local language of those particular people. And we're able to do it in Tata, and we're hoping to do it everywhere else we go. But the point is that we often have that answer when it comes to access, because language is about access, and we easily deny access by saying that asnamali to provide the access. But then what's the point of pretending to be bringing the service when you're actually denying the access? So it's one of the things that we are that we are looking at, and also the issue of just malicious compliance. And that's why we are saying that part of what we have to do, often when I do an interview with the SABC, we'll do it in English, and then they'll ask, oh, can you speak an African language? Because obviously they have to, it's the SABC. And do you see how often you get away with saying no? Because sometimes you're tired, you've had a long day, now you must do an interview, and then you say no, and then they let you go. And I said to them the last time, I spoke to one of the editors and I said to them, stop letting people go with them just saying that they can't or are they're tired, because again, it's denying access to information, you know, but also moving away from malicious compliance, because we often view the issue of language, which is so crucial as malicious compliance. And not to brag, but anyway, I'm going to brag a little bit. When we did our study in 2012, as part of our master's research, the topic was actually on the importance of language and access in primary healthcare institutions. And we were actually looking at how language can become a barrier to a person's ability to access primary health care, and we obviously are going to go into the details of the topic. But it's so amazing that 9 years later, it's still such a major issue in practice. Still such a major issue in practice that you go to a primary healthcare institution or facility, and in policy I have the right to demand to be treated in my language of preference, especially if that language is part of the regional languages as per the Constitution. And so often you'll find that you will not get that service in that language. And it's one of the things that we are saying, that we have to move beyond the issue of malicious compliance, but also the enforcement of our policies that exist. And part of the reason, and I always say this, that a lot of the reason that policies are not, there is malicious compliance and the issue of enforcement is not as rigorous as it is, because we don't look at the issue of language as we do other issues. So if our commands says our it's a big problem, of course it's a problem. But if I can't get a service in my language, I should be able, and that's the point that we are making, that you should be able to report the implementation of a language policy the same way that we report all other very fundamental issues in the state. And lastly, Prof, you know, with SMCI, for me the most important thing, and which is what we also spoke about, is the continuous writing, which is why we're so encouraged by young people who, you know, I was so fascinated by the young lady when we did, I think it was this year's State of the Nation address. Her name escapes me, but the young lady from the Eastern Cape. Yes, who was the press poet for the president. And she was absolutely amazing. So it's through the writing, it's through the research that we continue to do, it's through this week, you know. I can't remember, I think this entire week was introduced when I was still a student here, if I'm not mistaken, but it's not the first time we've done this, it's not. Okay. But it's through conversations such as the one that we have right now. And you know, Prof also raised an important point that, and which is why we also made the point that beyond, you know, Nkai having been a poet and a writer and all of that, he was actually also a freedom fighter. And we forget that. You know, through his work, that was actually his contribution towards the struggle for liberation. That was, you know, through him having resigned from Lovedale to say, Ndobana, I'm not going to teach isiXhosa in English. That was a form of protest in itself. So academia has actually always been such an important part of not just our liberation struggle, but also how our country has developed and gone forward, because institutions of higher learning has always been these, you know, spaces for knowledge production, but also bringing about new ideas that take society forward. So really, it really is through these platforms that we have, and the week that we are going to have, and you know, the arts that we are going to see. And another important part also is also the fact that, I mean, I was telling the DVC earlier on that some of the work that we are going to be doing, Prof, is also going to be working with the National Arts Festival team, because we have to keep the arts alive. We have to keep the arts alive. We have to keep that festival alive. And I'm so happy when I heard that the provincial government is fully on board. We are now working very hard to get the national government on board as well, because it is a national festival. And we want, that's through your platform such as the National Arts Festival, we are going to ensure that the legacy of Mhlauli lives on for the next 150 years. Thank you, thank you.
Kim Kai's life, maybe some of the colleagues who are here who are doing literature maybe can respond as well to add to what the DM has said. Is there any colleague by any chance who would like to add to that? Second round of questions, okay. Dr. Obi. Another hand while we are, there's a second one, the third one. The second round of questions and then we call it a day. The third one, wonderful. Doc, Obi, and then the gentleman there, and then Dr. Joe.
Thank you very much, DM. What an eloquent articulation of the challenges that we are presently facing in the global south, if you may allow me to use that category. I do appreciate that whatever you are doing is a lot of agency that it's well conceptualized in terms of what needs to be done insofar as the issues of implementation are concerned. Perhaps this is not a question, but something which I think could be instructive in terms of what you as government perhaps may consider to do. I'm thinking here in terms of, as a scholar, I'm so much fascinated by the theory of speed and the concept of empire. We all know how empire travels, or the speed at which empire travels, faster than the automobile. And currently we are now talking of the teletechnologies in which one can move from point A to B without having to leave. I can be in Cape Town right now without having to leave where I'm sitting, through the tele-action that is enhanced by the technologies of the day. We want our local languages as Africans to do well, but at the level of empire, which has taken over and dwarfed or even subsumed our own ancient African empires that we own, to the extent that we no longer even think in terms of our own empires as Africans, because they have long gone. I would say, DM, you need to invest seriously in terms of speed. You cannot compete if what you are competing against is faster than you. The empire is very fast. What are you doing in order to be able to travel at perhaps a reasonable speed that can enable you to surpass the speed of empire? For as long as the empire is ahead, we will continue to talk and talk and talk until cows come home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. The speed, the key word, the speed. The speed of the fun. The speed, Doc. Thank you so much for that question. The next one, the gentleman up there. The refreshments are there outside, guys. John. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Good evening to you, PT, and to everyone at large. I don't think I have any question really about the layers and most of the stuff that you have mentioned in there. And this question may be entirely not to you directly, but to everyone at large. How do we acknowledge the constructs of the stereotype, and how do we collectively as the people work towards deconstructing the stereotype of African languages? Because we're having this ceremony right now, but we're still speaking in these other languages.
Yes, better, yes, better. With the speed of the technology, we need to have something up there. Or the speakers cost up, sorry,
my friend, this morning. Thank you very much. Mine is not a question per se, but maybe a comment. To say thank you to the Minister, the Deputy Minister, for coming here today. We teach our students a lot about what African languages can do for them. And also, just like that, there is a future beyond Rhodes University. Most of them are discouraged by what's happening around them. And the Minister, being a former student of Rhodes University, showcases that there are possibilities beyond what they are learning in the classroom, that they can take the knowledge that they have and take it forward. And also, thank you for your speech, because it talked to what we learn a lot in African languages, especially in translation studies, where we're trying to teach students about the importance of access of information and them being the mediums standing for their people, for them to understand the importance of doing right by the people that they are representing. And then lastly, we are teaching them a lot about AI technology and that they should participate in those spaces. But the problem that we generally have is that of funding, especially for them to be able to be involved in projects that can take the language forward. So I don't know what government can do to help out institutions in that regard, so that students can be involved in this drive towards the advancement of African languages.
Thank you so much, Joe. I think, Joe, what I like what you're saying is the key word, the funding, Joe. Funding. And you started by thanking her, Lord. Thank you. The funding. Let's not forget the funding. Dr. Joe is a lecturer in translation in the School of Languages. In case you don't know her, yeah. She's also a supervisor. If you need a fourth or fifth supervisor, she's there. Okay, great. Yeah?
We all need funding, Doc, I can tell you that, and the Minister of Finance will tell you that as well. But you know, you raised such an important point. I think, you know, I actually remembered now, I remember when I was a student here back in the day, I didn't do the course, but I've seen it practically develop over time. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were doing a research on that, Sam, with Prof. Lorenzo, which was around, it was around digitization. Yes, I remember that. It was around digitization. And at the time, the big issue was Google Translate. And it was still being developed at the time. And 10 years later, I make use of Google Translate so much. And to think that back in the day, we were still working on, you know, ensuring that when you do go into Google Translate, you get the correct translations. And that work practically right now, that when you go to Google right now, you say, you choose language list, you choose isiXhosa, you put in an English word, the isiXhosa translation will come. That's actually work that was done here at the School of Languages, and the research was done here, and it's so amazing for me how I see it develop practically over time. But bringing the point, oh yes, please. So the point really is that and I'm making that example because I want to come to the point that the gentleman made, I think the first student, who was talking about deconstructing the stereotype, right? It's ensuring that our tools of communication, particularly in the digital world, part of it, an essential part of it is ensuring that our languages in the development, that we all spoke about that, in the development of these technologies, our languages don't become an add-on. But at the time in which it's developed, ensuring that indigenous African languages are a key component of that, particularly for translation studies, accessibility, and all of that. But also, there's also, and that's the second point, that, there is, I can tell you, as an MP, there's a lot of money, guys, in translation work. Parliament is always looking for translators, government departments are always looking for translators. The president travels with a translator. Look, they don't think that you are in an area of study that doesn't have opportunities. There's massive opportunities out there. There's massive work out there. And actually, but I think even right now, with them having gone to UNGA is the United Nations General Assembly, part of the people that they travel with is that we, in a lot of the work that we do, I was in a meeting the other day where we had 3 translators. It was myself and counterparts from 2 other countries, and I spoke English, the other counterparts spoke French, and the other one spoke Swahili. And I don't understand French, I can hear a little bit of Swahili, they don't understand English, the other one doesn't understand French. And we had to have a meeting, because we had to have a meeting between the 3 countries. And we had to have 3 translators in the meeting, and that the meeting was 3 times longer, because when you speak, then the 2 have to, But the point that I'm trying to make is that we must never think that this is not important work. And we see it every day, how absolutely crucial it is. You can't think that you're going to be able to sign a trade deal if you don't understand each other. If you look at BRICS, those BRICS countries, some speak English, the Russians don't speak English, we don't speak Russian, the Chinese don't, So, and you are an economic bloc who must coexist and cooperate to build your countries. So the point that I just wanted to stress is that, and the other part is, the idea around deconstructing the stereotype of African languages is also, and this is also part of the history of our languages, and I'm sure you guys will know this because you've been taught this, in that we also mustn't forget that particularly our indigenous African languages and how they currently exist, part of it is as a result of the colonial legacy of our continent. Every time when I travel in East Africa, and I can now hear Swahili because it's actually a Bantu language. And the more time I spend actually in other parts of the continent, the more I'm convinced that we actually need to move towards Swahili. I'm so convinced of it because it's actually the same language. I cannot follow a conversation that is being had in Swahili without having learned the language, but because the language components are the same, it is a Bantu language. The other day I was saying someone was speaking in Tonga, and I responded to them and they asked me, how do you know Tonga? I'm like, because it's a Bantu language. So if you know isiXhosa, you'll be able to follow Tonga. If you know isiZulu, you'll be able to follow Swahili and all of that. So part of what, perhaps part of what we need to move towards, and I'm hoping it's still a conversation in the space. I haven't been in the space for a long time, but I know that particularly here at the school and with the different conferences that do take place, is us moving towards a regional language that we will speak, and that will not be a former colonial language, but also a language of an indigenous African language. And it's not even, it's also about trade relations, and this is the point I was making earlier on, to say that if we were to sign a trade deal with Tanzania, for an example, why should that discussion be in English? There's no need for it to be in English. It's the same idea, when we had the BRICS summit, a big discussion that we were having with the BRICS partners. We were hosting the BRICS summit, I think about 2 years ago, was de-dollarization. If we as BRICS Plus partners are talking about trade among ourselves, is absolutely, why are we trading in a currency of a country that's not part of ourselves? So it's these type of ideas that, and of course, it caused a whole big panic in the world, but we have to move towards part of the African Renaissance agenda is exactly that, us training among each other, people-to-people relations, cultural exchanges, academic exchanges, and part of the fundamental development of our continent will be how do we, as a continent, consolidate. And language is a big part of that consolidation, because you can't speak about development, you can't speak about the economy, you can't speak about culture, and all other aspects of development without looking at the issue of language. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question, to the question. And I think I also then tried to touch on the issue of the speed of the empire. And I agree totally with the doc that we must, we have these conversations, but for me, we're taking a bit too long to get to the conclusion of these conversations. And I think really the point that you were emphasizing with the issue of speed. And sometimes it does need bold decisions. You know, there's a particular world leader that I won't name because it's the media here. But with all of the things that I don't like about that leader, I do admire their ability to make bold decisions and implement them, whether you agree with that or not. And I do think that sometimes we tend to be, as a continent, we tend to be over cautious on things that we should accelerate, you know, and we obviously want to be responsible. We want to ensure that we, you know, looked at all the sides of all the decisions, but there's no reason for us to not make certain decisions of the continent that will be in the interest of our people, and really move away from our legacy of colonialism that continues to be with us. In South Africa, of course, we speak about colonialism of a special type, because unlike other African countries, the colonizer left. You know, with us, the colonizer didn't leave. We had a negotiated settlement. And that is why it's taken a bit longer for us to deconstruct. I remember when I was doing politics back in the day, there was a course that was taught by Prof. Julie Wells. It was called the deconstruction of the deconstruction of the African mind. And I reference that course so much because it's such an important piece of work in how do we deconstruct the African mind from a legacy of colonialism and a legacy of apartheid, and structurally and institutionally also then ensuring that deconstruction happens. I mean, you see, I think I saw the other day the students at Rhodes were having a commemoration of the Rhodes Must Fall movement. An important occurrence in the work of the deconstruction that we have to continue to do to really get to a point of total liberation. Thank you.
I think that must be enough. Sivile, sihluthi up, silambe down there. All right, thank you so much, colleagues. Without wasting any time, I'll invite Professor Mukenge to thank us, and then after that, I'll close the session. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you, MC. Can you give a round of applause to the DM? She is brilliant, eh? Full of knowledge. Thank you, ma'am. Ah, okay. Thank you, ma'am. You are wonderful, ma'am. Okay. I just want to say thank you to her, our esteemed guest of honor, DM. DVC, thank you, ma'am. Prof. Kwasha, thank you. MC, colleagues, oh, okay, this is good. Colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, professors, Mhlauli. It's both an honor and a privilege to deliver the vote of thanks at this year's SEK Mkai Day celebration. A day that holds deep culture, literary, and intellectual significance for all of us gathered here. Today, we came together not only to commemorate the life of work for SEK Mkai, but also to reaffirm our commitment to the preservation, promotion, and celebration of isiXhosa language. Literature and identity through the inspiring performance, reflections, scholarly contribution, and the powerful creative expression we witnessed today. We reminded that SEK Mkai legacy is not only a relic of the past, but a living, breathing force that will continue to shape minds, raise questions, and inspire generations. On behalf of the Rhodes University School of Languages and Literature, and particularly the section of African languages, I want to express my sincere gratitude to all those who have contributed to the successful today's celebration. A special thank to our speakers. Ma'am, thank you a lot. Kositako, merci beaucoup. We thank all of you. Ma'am, your words have breathed new life into Mkai vision and echoing this prophetic voice through modern lenses and life experience. To our students who are here, your passion and creativity continue to drive this initiative forward. You remind us that SEK Mkai Day is not merely a day of remembrance, but a platform of growth, for growth expression and for reinventing the future of isiXhosa language, literature, and scholarship. To the organizing committee and staff, we appreciate your tireless effort behind the scene, your attention to details, and your dedication to preserving the integrity of this event are deeply appreciated. I will say in French, bravo. Bravo, bravo in Italian. For turning this vision into reality year after year. To our partners, sponsors, and university leadership, we sincerely thank you for reorganizing the importance of this celebration and for embedding it officially in the Rhodes University calendar. Your support, ma'am, ensures that African languages and cultures occupy the space they deserve in our academy and public discourse. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today in this celebration. Your presence affirms the value that Mkai stood for: unity, identity, and the enduring power of language. As we close this day of celebration, let us carry with us the spirit of SEK Mkai, bold, visionary, and not be afraid to speak the truth through words. May this legacy continue to guide us as we nurture the isiXhosa language, celebrate African literature, and honor the stories that shape who we are today. Inkosi kakhulu. Siyabulela. Merci.